Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. A major disruption averted today after postal workers backed down from walking out, but there's still a possibility of escalating strike action. Plus, Canada Revenue Agency cuts up to 280 permanent workers due to financial restraints. A major prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine begins today following direct talks between the country last week.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. An ongoing strike threat at Canada Post could push more customers away. A major disruption was averted today after the union representing some 55,000 postal workers backed down from a walkout, but there's still a possibility of escalating job action. The Crown Corporation says customers may face delays as some 55,000 postal workers swear off overtime shifts. They've been told to refuse any work beyond 8 hours in a day and 40 hours in a week. In the meantime, the union says its negotiators will continue to review Canada Post's latest contract offers. The Better Business Bureau is warning Canadians that in the event of a postal strike, they may see an uptick in scams and fraudsters. BBB says in the latest postal shutdown, they saw an increase of phishing scams via text and email messages, with fraudsters pretending they were Canada Post. Businesses are especially warned to be on the lookout for fraud delivery notifications that request credit card, banking, or account information.
So you'll get a text from, let's say, somebody that's pretending to be a delivery company saying that they have your package and they'd like to deliver it, but they need to hit this link so they can continue on to get the information they need to deliver the package. It's all scam. They're just trying to steal, like I said, identity and possibly credit card information or any other information they can get from you. The bottom line with this is people should always be very wary of clicking on links from unknown senders. And even if they think it's somebody they know, be wary of that.
Victims of phishing scams can contact the police, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, or the BBB themselves. A potential strike at Canada Post has Lethbridge County encouraging residents to sign up for e-bills. Haley Pinkson, the Director of Corporate Services with Lethbridge County, says payment deadlines remain in effect regardless of postal delays.
It's encouraging people to kind of sign up with e-billing and just allowing for online access to ensure that information should continue to be shared and provided with our residents. So they can call our office to connect with us if they have questions or need help. If they're comfortable with signing up for e-billing, that's probably the best option in terms of ensuring that they have all the information that they need. But definitely reach out if they have questions, and they can connect on our website, and we will be posting lots of information in the upcoming days as we learn more about the situation and how we can best support our residents.
To register for e-bill, you can also visit the website. Canada's new energy minister paid a visit to Calgary today, speaking to oil and gas executives at a Calgary Chamber of Commerce luncheon. Tim Hodgson repeated some things that Prime Minister Mark Carney had said before the election.
The old economic relationship with the United States is over. We need to accept that. We need to prepare to compete as Canadians on our terms. Prime Minister Carney has laid out a clear strategy. We will be masters of our own home. We will not bow to economic aggression. We will defend our workers, our industries, and our values. To be strong, we need to build things in this country again. We will make Canada a true, conventional, and clean energy superpower. Your federal government's door is open. My door is open. I want you to bring your ideas. I want you to bring your ambitions. And together, we will build.
We're willing to work with the government. We want to see big projects built. We want to see Canada succeed. And now, I think to what the minister said, we're looking for results. And so we'll be eager to participate in that work that needs to occur. But I think actions are really what we're looking for.
A new Leger poll shows that more than half of Canadians understand why the province of Alberta might want to become an independent country, but more than 3 in 5 say they don't want that to happen. Sébastien Dallaire, Leger's executive vice president for Eastern Canada, said the survey suggests that there's a level of empathy for Albertans.
What we see in the survey is there's a level of empathy for Alberta right now and for Albertans. So people outside of Alberta, it's a majority who say, we get it. We understand why Albertans are frustrated right now. At the same time, they don't think it's a good idea for Alberta to leave because obviously it has big consequences for the country. If you're in BC, it means the country will be split in half from your perspective, where you're separated physically from the rest of Canada. If you're elsewhere, you know it opens up a can of worms. If one province leaves, then it may open up more discussion about, of course, Quebec possibly also wanting to do the same, or other provinces. Albertans are very divided on the issue. There's no other way to look at it. We see that there is significant support for at least trying to shake things up. I mean, we're measuring a result right now that shows that Albertans are almost evenly divided between being favorable or unfavorable at the idea of leaving Canada. However, we know from what happened in 2 previous referendums in Quebec that those numbers tend to move quite a bit once you get into the details of what does it mean, how would it happen, how would it work afterwards, how would we conduct a referendum. So when you get into the mechanics of it all, sometimes opinions shift. So is this really a hard level of support at this time? Probably not, but it's a clear indication that there's a potential for the movement to really gain a strong foothold in the province, and it's something to really keep an eye on, and something that should be taken seriously by the national government, but also by other provinces and then by Albertans themselves.
That poll was based on surveying about 1,500 people. The province of Alberta has announced funding to create some new teams to battle wildfires. Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services Mike Ellis says almost $7 million is being invested into the creation of 6 new wildland urban interface teams. Ellis says when the province declared a state of emergency to battle wildfires a couple of years ago, and also during last year's fire in Jasper, they noticed a gap in firefighting.
We have the folks that do an excellent job when it comes to structural firefighting. We have the folks that do the wildfire firefighting, but there seemed to be a bit of a disconnect, right? So when a wildland firefighter is approaching a municipality or some sort of structure, we had to make sure that we have that interface. And so having the ability to have not only the 2 teams that we had, to have 6 more teams, strategically place them throughout the province so that they can be deployed wherever a crisis occurs is fantastic.
Ellis says the 6 new teams will be located in Strathmore, Hinton, Slave Lake, Lac-La-Biche County, Key-Tas-Kee-Now Tribal Council, and the Kananaskis Improvement District. The 2 existing teams are based out of Clearwater County and the town of High Level, Alberta. Alberta Finance Minister Nate Horner says the leadership of the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees has not been forthright with its members. After breaking off negotiations, 22,000 AUPE members who work for the government voted overwhelmingly in favor of strike action. The government says it has offered a 12% wage increase over 4 years, the same deal that other provincial public sector groups have agreed to. AUPE, however, is demanding a 29% increase in 4 years, and Nate Horner tells BCN that increase would cost taxpayers greatly over the course of time.
Well, this table represents 22 or 23,000 employees in various sectors. The essential services agreement covers about 6,000 of those workers. But as far as what they can expect, if the union does choose to strike, then the government will have to look at what their options are if we're to proceed with a lockout or some other mechanism to try to, minimize any disruptions to society. If we did agree to the terms that AUP last communicated with us and applied them across the entirety of the public service, we'd be talking about, something in line of the entirety of the Heritage Fund in cost, or the entire K-12 budget for multiple years. So this has a dramatic impact to, potential impact for Alberta taxpayers as well. But as far as the GOA's perspective, we know we're offering fair deals. We have the market data to back it up, and we hope that union leadership sees that.
Horner also says that contingency planning is ongoing to support core government services in the event of a strike or a lockout. Mediation is set to begin on June the 2nd. The Alberta government is helping the veterinary medicine faculty at the University of Calgary to continue to expand the work being done at its diagnostic laboratory. The lab will get $3.1 million this year, part of $9.5 million over 3 years that was promised in Budget 2025. Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, R.J. Sigurdsson, says it will help Alberta farmers and ranchers do what they do best.
Their care for their animals, the time and commitment they put into every one of their operations is reflected in the high quality product that gets put out in Alberta. And there's nothing this province and our producers hold highly more than animal health and wellness. And today, this announcement goes a long way to just that and opening up more opportunities for research and continuing to make Alberta the best place to raise a family and to farm and ranch and to do veterinary medicine.
Sigurdsson says the funding will help the laboratory retain highly skilled staff and expand its ability to test for more types of infectious organisms and support disease investigations. The Canada Revenue Agency is cutting up to 280 permanent employees. It's in response to financial restraints after the CRA examined its operating budget over the last 2 years. The CRA says the job losses mainly are impacting employees in the National Capital Region, and executive positions are also being impacted. Earlier this month, the Union of Taxation Employees announced that the agency would not renew contracts for more than 1,000 term workers across Canada. The Conservatives have gained another seat in Parliament. A judicial recount in a rural Newfoundland riding has put Conservative Jonathan Rao ahead of the Liberal candidate by 12 votes. Previously, Liberal Anthony Germain was ahead by 12 votes, which was a narrow enough margin for Elections Canada to trigger an automatic judicial recount. The win earns the Conservatives a third seat in the province, while the Liberals have 4. Thursday, when the G7 finance ministers wrapped up their meeting in Banff, Alberta, Finance Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne outlined the ministers' very serious discussions around the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
We have reiterated our support for Ukraine against Russia's illegal invasion, including to ramping up sanctions if necessary, and to support efforts to foster private sector participation in the recovery and in the reconstruction of Ukraine. We also agree that no one who supported the Russian war machine will benefit from reconstruction efforts in Ukraine.
And today, a major prisoner exchange began between the two countries. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the first phase of the exchange is bringing home 390 Ukrainians, with further releases expected over the weekend. This is one of the few signs of progress from the country's direct talks last week in Istanbul. The negotiations were part of U.S.-led efforts that so far has failed to produce a ceasefire in the 3-year-old war. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened a 50% tariff on all imports from the European Union starting in June as his tumultuous trade war with the world continues. On social media today, Trump also floated the idea of a 25% tariff on Apple products unless iPhones are made in the U.S.
Trump says he wants to charge higher import taxes on goods from the EU, a long-standing U.S. ally, then from China, a geopolitical rival that had its tariffs cut to 30% this month so Washington and Beijing could hold negotiations. Trump was upset by the lack of progress in trade talks with the EU, which has insisted on cutting tariffs to zero, even as the president has publicly insisted on preserving a baseline 10% tax on most imports. In response to Trump's tariffs on China, Apple CEO Tim Cook said earlier this month that most iPhones sold in the U.S. during the current fiscal quarter would come from India, with iPads and other devices being imported from Vietnam.
The threats delivered over social media reflect Trump's ability to disrupt the global economy as markets tumbled following his posts. A special day today at Lethbridge Polytechnic. The first graduation convocation was held since it transitioned from Lethbridge College. Around 750 students received their degrees, diplomas, or certificates. Jaden Houston, who graduated with a diploma in agriculture sciences and agronomy, also received the Governor General's Academic Award.
There's a lot of very intelligent people here at the institution, so it's quite surprising that I was selected to receive that. Now that I do have my diploma, is to jump into my last 2 years here at the college and complete my agriculture sciences bachelor's degree. After that, it will likely be back to my family's farm to hopefully take over some or all aspects of it. To be the first convocating class of Lethbridge Polytechnic. I know the Polytechnic has a long-standing place here in southern Alberta, and it's kind of cool. I'm from central Alberta initially, so coming down to Lethbridge Polytechnic and being able to kind of be a first down here as well as moving down here for school is kind of unique.
Lethbridge Polytechnic will graduate more than 1,300 students in May, and we wish all of them congratulations. The town of Coaldale held a groundbreaking ceremony for a new revitalization project on a major skate park. The project will be collectively funded by the town, the provincial government, and the Kinsman Club of Coaldale, totaling $1.2 million. Additionally, the park's basketball court and playground will see upgrades. MLA and Associate Minister for Water, Grant Hunter, says the province is happy to support through the Community Facility Enhancement Program to further support growing community.
As Mayor Jack Van Ryan said, he wants to make sure that the work that's done in Coaldale also brings along the youth and helps the youth to feel like this is a place for them as well. And so a skate park and the other types of, or the other parts of the park are going to provide that. You know, you've got the basketball court that's going to be revitalized. You got the jungle gym that's going to be revitalized. All this stuff is going to be for younger kids, and then the skate park for the teenagers. It's just great to be able to see that kind of work being done here in Coaldale.
The town, province, and Kinsman Club have collectively provided $400,000 each towards the project. Lethbridge is reminding residents about water usage. The latest data shows the 3 southern Alberta reservoirs that feed the Old Man watershed are at or below average levels. The St. Mary Reservoir is above normal at 82% full. The Waterton Reservoir is 48% full, which is normal. The Old Man Reservoir, which feeds the city of Lethbridge, is 65% full, but that's below normal. The city is once again asking that residents be mindful of their water usage. Last year, water consumption in Lethbridge dropped by an astounding 14% compared to 2023 volumes. The Edmonton Oilers will be looking to stay out of the penalty box tonight in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals in Dallas. The Oilers were up 3-1 after 2 periods on Tuesday, but a parade to the penalty box in the 3rd period led to 3 Dallas power play goals and eventually a 6-3 Oilers loss. Dallas leads the best of 7, 1-0. And that Game 2 gets underway at 6 p.m. this evening. I'm showing my support for the last Canadian team in the playoffs by wearing the Oilers colors here. Also tonight, periods of rain showers continuing into this evening, but the sky will be clearing up nicely for a beautiful weekend ahead of us. I will be right back with your full weather report. Well, a bit of a drizzly one out there today, and we did not reach our anticipated daytime high. Actually, far from that 17 degrees. It was more like we got up to about 12 degrees today. This evening, also looking at a 30% chance of showers. So tonight is the last night we're going to be seeing that risk of thunderstorms and chance of showers. After that, we got lots of clear skies, and we're starting to, make way for a beautiful weekend here, and even some really lovely, gorgeous, hot temperatures coming up next week. So 22 degrees starting on Saturday with clear skies, sunshine Sunday, high of 27. That's more like it. 29 on Monday, 25 Tuesday, back to 29 on Wednesday, and up to 31 degrees on a Thursday. They're not quite a record breaker. We'd have to be at about 32.4 to break the record, which happened back in 1986. 86 was a very hot year. Okay, high of the average high for this time of year, 20 degrees, average low 6 degrees. 33 was the record high on this day. Happened back in 2001, and in 1960 we saw our record low of -4. Sun rose this morning at 5:37, sunset 9:20, giving us 15, getting so close to that 16-hour mark for sure. So we're 2 minutes longer sunlight, daylight today than we had yesterday. So I think we're sitting around, oh gosh, close to 16. We'll just put it that way. Okay, a beautiful weekend on the West Coast with sunny skies. Victoria high of 20 degrees, 19 in Vancouver, but the further inland you go, 24 degrees is what it's going to be more like. 22 in Edmonton tomorrow with sunny skies and sunshine, and 22 in Calgary tomorrow. Calgary also seeing a bit of fog in the morning. That should be dissipating. And then as we get into the afternoon in Calgary, seeing some scattered clouds there. Okay, Saskatoon sunshine, 22 degrees. Regina sunny and hazy conditions. 20 there, and a high of 21 in Winnipeg tomorrow with sunshine, but local smoke as well due to those wildfires that are still going on. As we look at the central part of the region here, we are seeing more rain for sure there. So 16 for the high expected in Toronto, 30% chance of showers, more like 70% in Ottawa, and 60% expected in Montreal. Highs of 13 and 12 in those cities respectively. Getting to the east coast here, we are seeing more showers, drizzle, rain, you name it. 2 to 4 millimeters rather expected tomorrow in Fredericton. High of 10 degrees there, 12 degrees expected in Halifax with 30% chance of showers, 30% also expected in Charlottetown with 13 as the expected high tomorrow, 6 degrees in St. John's with 2 millimeters of rain. So there you have it. That is your forecast. A Conservative MP has launched a petition to end Canada's temporary foreign worker program. Ontario MP Jamil Jivani claims the temporary foreign worker program is taking jobs away from Canadians and suppressing wages. Jivani says his petition does not include temporary workers in the agricultural sector and suggests those workers should be included in a separate program. The government announced plans last year to reduce the number of temporary foreign workers being admitted to Canada and to refuse to process applications in metropolitan areas with more than 6% unemployment. Canadian retail sales rose 0.8% to $69.8 billion in March, powered by an increase in new car sales. Stats Canada says that sales were up in 6 of 9 subsectors as sales at motor vehicle and parts dealers led the way at 4.8%. Sales at building material and garden equipment and supplies dealers rose 2.6%, as did clothing, accessories, shoes, jewelry, luggage, and leather goods. A survey of more than 1,100 nonprofit organizations' employees from across Canada has found more than 1/3 of workers regularly feel burnt out and exhausted. The Changemaker Wellbeing Index says 36% of workers are struggling with issues such as anxiety, poor job satisfaction, and insufficient household incomes. 34% of respondents at community nonprofits say they are food insecure, while 20% said they were likely to quit their position in the next 6 months. In 2012, it was announced that the Canadian penny would be phased out of circulation. The decision was based on the high cost of production, and now, south of the border, the U.S. Mint has announced it too will no longer produce the penny. The Mint says the final order of penny blanks has been submitted with no plans to make the coin when those do run out. The U.S. government would see an immediate annual savings of $56 million U.S. in reduced material costs by stopping penny production. Earlier this year, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that he had ordered his administration to cease production of the 1-cent coin. And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 25 basis points to 25,879. The Dow was down 256 points to 41,603. The S&P 500 was down 39 points to 5,802, and the Nasdaq was down 188 points to 18,737. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 55 cents to $61.75 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to $3.31 US. Gold was up 58.05 to 33.58 US an ounce, and silver was up 41 cents to $33.45 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.84 per bushel, barley is at $6.86, canola is at $16.40, and corn is at $7.95 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 17 cents to $215.80. Feeder cattle August contract was up 60 cents to $300.38. Lean hogs June contract was down 40 cents to $98.30. And the Canadian dollar was up over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 72.80 cents US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Federal Energy Minister Tim Hodgins was in Calgary today, reiterating Ottawa's plans to turn the country into an energy superpower. Hodgson told oil and gas executives at a Chamber of Commerce luncheon the federal government will have a single body in charge of approving all major projects in 2 years. He says it's time for Canada and the energy sector to get some quick wins. Immigration continues to be a concern for Canadians, mainly due to its drain on public resources. But a study done by Cardis suggests it's not the government who should be solely helping immigrants settle into Canadian life. Our next guest says the church should be playing a role. That interview is coming right up. But also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.
Immigration continues to be a concern for Canadians. Now, a new study from Cardis, a nonpartisan Canadian Christian think tank, says federal and provincial governments need to recognize churches and other faith communities as trusted partners in helping immigrants settle into life in Canada. Joining us from Ottawa is Reverend Dr. Andrew Bennett. He is the Faith Communities Program Director at Cardis. Good to have you with us, Dr. Bennett.
Thanks very much. It's wonderful to be with you.
Now, can you explain how you went about doing the research on this study? Because you interviewed a number of pastors across Canada.
So this study that we just recently put out builds upon a lot of other work that we've done at Cardis through polling with the Angus Reid Institute in Vancouver, BC. And that polling data gives us a baseline for how Canadians engage with religious faith. And one of the data points that we've looked at in the past is the religiosity of new Canadians, of immigrants. And what we found is that immigrants are more likely to be more religious than Canadians who were born in Canada. Wow. So we wanted to explore that a little bit more. And so in this relatively short study, we interviewed a number of Christian pastors from across the country, principally in Ontario and BC, to look at what is their experience in dealing with predominantly or largely immigrant congregations, and what are some of the challenges they're seeing that their congregants are facing, those who are new arrivals to Canada.
Now, the study, first of all, suggests that our federal government recognized churches and other faith communities as trusted partners in immigrant integration. How open is our federal government to taking advice from and working with Canada's religious community?
Well, historically, the federal government has been very open, as have all levels of government. In fact, if we look at one particular area of policy, and that would be refugee resettlement, historically, the federal government has always partnered with faith communities to help resettle refugees. And for many years, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but certainly for many years, the largest refugee settlement organization in the country after the federal government itself was the Office of Refugees of the Archdiocese of Toronto, so the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto, which particularly during the Syrian refugee crisis was responsible for settling hundreds of refugees. So that relationship has been there historically. And I think often at a very local level, Canadians know that faith communities play significant roles in their local communities, not just in terms of refugee resettlement or support for immigrants, but providing a whole range of services that people can draw upon, whether it's putting your kids in the Girl Guides or the Boy Scouts or taking advantage of a 12-step program or an In from the Cold program. They know that religious people, particularly Christians, because we're the most numerous in the country, have this role in the local community. But I think what happens sometimes is as we get up to higher levels of administration and government, there's often a bit of an amnesia that faith communities, and in the case of this study, Christian churches play these very important roles. And so often I think government forgets the need to engage these communities because often they have very specific awareness and knowledge and experience of working with immigrants in this case. And so I think it really behooves government to be engaged with churches, with other faith communities that are doing this work that in many cases government simply cannot do on its own. And so they have to recognize the role that has been always played by faith communities in local communities in the country.
Now, you say that immigrants face systemic barriers through the process of applying for permanent residency and that they should be given clearer expectations with regard to timelines?
That's correct. I think one of the major challenges that immigrants face when they come to Canada, they are not fully aware of the lengthy processes that are involved in going from being landed as a permanent resident, a landed immigrant, becoming a permanent resident, and then eventually, becoming a Canadian citizen. And in some cases, that is even more complicated for those that come in as refugees who are not, let's say, convention refugees. So I think often the expectations are that things will go a little bit more smoothly. And we know from the experience of many, many immigrants that that's not always the case, that things get delayed. They're not aware of how to negotiate kind of the administrative apparatus. They're new to the country. And so being thrown into all the bureaucracy that's involved in the immigrant resettlement, the immigrant settlement process, it's a real challenge for them. And they get frustrated. They don't know how to navigate it. And so they look to their faith community quite often as that community that can provide that support for them to help get them through this period. So I think, again, governments would do well to engage with churches, to engage with faith communities across the country, to really get a sense of what those local people are experiencing and to help those faith communities provide support for them.
Now, I would guess that for many immigrants, there can be challenges in learning to communicate well in English or French. I've heard that English is one of the hardest to learn as a second language. So what would you like to see take place to help newcomers learn one or both languages?
Well, of course, I think it's essential for people to be able to settle fully into the country that they learn one of the two official languages. And that just allows them obviously to integrate more fully into the social structures that we have in Canada. And churches, again, and other faith communities can be those places where those skills are acquired. And there are a lot of faith communities across the country, churches in particular, that are offering English as a second language program. So I know my church, for example, in Ottawa, I'm a Ukrainian Greek Catholic deacon. And so our Ukrainian Catholic parish here in Ottawa has received, since the escalation of the war in Ukraine, a lot of displaced Ukrainians coming to Canada fleeing the war. And in many cases, they simply don't have adequate English language skills so as to be able to make use of their often very highly acquired skills that they have to be able to find work and so forth. So our church is providing them with English language acquisition. And often that is done on a voluntary basis. It's not done with government funding. It's done simply out of the goodness of people's hearts. And so again, it's often at this very local level where faith communities play a major role in providing essential services to new Canadians. And government can't always step into that role because it's very, very local and often they're not aware of the local dynamics. But the local faith community is, because they're seeing these people on a daily basis. They're trying to find ways to engage with them, get them integrated into the community. And so they know them the best. And so they can often provide very nicely tailored settlement services, such as English language as a second language acquisition, that government can't provide. So government needs to see in these faith communities, in these churches, a tried, trusted, and true partner that can really help as part of the immigrant settlement process.
Your study revealed that there is a certain amount of fear and uncertainty for immigrants, and when faced with communicating with government agencies for various services, there can be a hesitancy to ask questions.
Well, I think especially when we consider immigrants that are coming from countries that they are fleeing as a result of persecution. So maybe they are facing persecution for their religious faith. Maybe they are facing persecution because of their ethnicity. And often the persecutors are the governments, their own governments that they are fleeing. And so when they come to a new country, even though they might fully appreciate that they're coming to a functioning democracy where they don't need to fear the government as they did in their home country, there still can be some trepidation as to, well, how do I engage with government? Can I trust them? Can I trust this person that I'm dealing with, maybe who's at providing immigrant settlement services for me at the government level? So I think, again, that's where a faith community, a religious community, a church can help to assuage those fears that people have and help them to become more socialized when it comes to, well, here in Canada, here's what government does. It's a democratic government. There are checks and balances on how governments act. The government doesn't actively, persecute people. You're safe here. But for someone who's just arrived from maybe a war-torn country, it takes some time, obviously, to help them through that. And so again, this is a very important role that a faith community can play, where you have people that they are engaging with that speak their language, that are of their same faith tradition. Maybe they have, common family back home in the home country. So again, there's that local knowledge, there's that local sensitivity to the human person that a Christian church or another faith community can provide.
Now, it's interesting that at the beginning of the interview, you alluded to that surveys show that immigrants, Canadians, are on average significantly more likely to be religiously committed as compared to non-immigrants. So it stands to reason that faith groups would be key to proper integration. So would you like to see financial and structural support from the government on this?
Yeah, I think there are varying types of support. I think one of the most important things is to ensure that governments are aware of the role of religious groups and of faith communities, and that, for example, their charitable status is crucial to them. So these faith communities are receiving funds from their congregants that are helping to support not just what that community, that faith community, that parish, that congregation is doing for their own people, but what they're doing for the community around them, including people that are not members of their congregation. So we've detailed a lot of this in our work at Cardis through something called the Halo Project. And the URL for that is haloproject.ca. And through the Halo Project, we demonstrate that the money that is taken in by a congregation is put back into the community, and there's a significant multiplier effect for money that is received and then what is provided in terms of goods and services by that faith community, not simply for their own people, but for the broader community. And so I think government needs to be aware of the role that faith communities play, and maybe not necessarily give them money, but provide them the ability to function as charitable entities, and to ensure that that charitable status is guarded because of the important work that these communities are doing for all Canadians, not just simply for their own co-religionists.
And I would think that help for newcomers to find jobs would be a huge priority. And again, the church would be a great place to offer support in this area. Even me as a non-immigrant, I got my start in TV just by getting involved with my church. Any thoughts on how this can be worked out, practically speaking?
I remember speaking with the Archbishop Emeritus of Toronto, Cardinal Collins, and he was obviously had that broad oversight for the Office of Refugees of the Archdiocese. And when you commit to be a sponsorship agreement holder, you commit to provide a full year's worth of funding to a new refugee to help them get settled in the country. And I remember that Cardinal Collins said to me that at that time, and this would have been, I think, probably around 2018, the Archdiocese had not had to pay out a full year's worth of support for a refugee because they were so effectively settled in jobs and they're so effectively integrated in the community by that parish that was supporting them that that 1 year commitment um, did not have to be fully met because they were integrated so effectively. And so after that first year, they had the support they needed. In many cases, they had jobs. They had the ongoing skills development that they needed because the parish was able to integrate in such an effective manner because of the local nature of the parish. And I think sometimes when you have a somewhat overcumbersome bureaucracy at the federal level or perhaps at the provincial level, they're not able to be as nimble as something at the local level. And so that nimbleness that a faith community can provide is, I think, really undervalued at times.
That's just fascinating, yet such a simple solution right in front of the government, right under the government's nose there. Now, are you hopeful that the government will respond to this report and offer some support?
I'm always hopeful. The hope really is that we can disseminate the report effectively enough so that people are reading it and those that are involved in policy making can, be first of all interested in the report and then hopefully reach out to us and enter into a discussion on policy recommendations that we have in the report. So I'm certainly grateful for being able to speak to you today, and we look for other opportunities to make this report better known, certainly within government circles above all.
Reverend Dr. Andrew Bennett is the Faith Communities Program Director at Cardis. Dr. Bennett, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Child abuse isn't something we typically like to talk about, but I think we can all agree it needs to stop. Joining us today is Christine Cassie. She is the CEO of Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. Christine, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. First off, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what the Chinook Sexual Assault Center does?
Well, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center has two main programs. One is the Sexual Assault Center, which provides a range of services from crisis intervention to therapy, including peer support groups, what we call system navigation. So sometimes people's lives just aren't going as well as what they'd hope they'd be because they're dealing with the impacts of the trauma that they're experiencing. So we'll help negotiate their way through certain systems that they want to deal with. We also provide specialized police and court support as well. So for those people who do want to go forward to report to police, because there's no statute of limitations in Canada, we will support them through that process all the way through to the court process with that as well. Beyond that, we also have our signature program, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, which is also called Chinook. Can never use that name enough, it seems. Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center deals with children 0 to 17 years of age that have been identified through children's services or through policing services throughout southwestern Alberta that have been abused, and either sexually abused, severe physical abuse, or severe neglect, or have been exposed to domestic violence. And so we actually broker the child forensic interviews to be done in a child-friendly, culturally sensitive space that we host, as well as then supporting the non-offending family members and the child throughout the court process and how they learn to heal through therapy and other resources that we have here.
Well, pretty heavy stuff that you're dealing with over there, Christine, for sure. Like I said earlier, child abuse, of course, isn't a topic we love to talk about, but you believe that it is, in fact, important to have those conversations about the issue.
Absolutely. What we know from the stats, both from a prevalence study that was done through the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services and stats that we get through policing agencies and child welfare agencies across Canada, is that it impacts about 1 in 3 kids. And so we look at a 34% prevalence rate really for child sexual abuse alone. In the city of Lethbridge, that would mean about 6,800 kids that may be impacted by some form of sexual abuse or some sort of sexual violation. So these are really staggering numbers that we're dealing with. forth. We also know that this is one of the leading issues that leads to when the trauma hasn't been resolved, that leads to sexual assault later in life. So there's a direct connection of what's going on here. We also know those that have had that exposure to domestic violence, they're seeing that violence in their home, that they're living this out day after day, that this also leads to other behaviors and things that absolutely impact then, how they respond to others as they grow into adult life and how they receive others. So what those healthy relationships may look like. And so our ability to be able to identify, to address, to intervene, we need to do, because if we don't deal with that trauma early, we know that we're setting up for a lifelong struggle.
What are some of the signs that a child may be experiencing abuse? What should we be looking for?
If you're an outsider looking in, sometimes what you may see is, certainly if it's physical abuse, you might see some bruising that really can't be explained on what that is. You might see some withdrawal behaviors are happening where they're not part of their regular or normal activities. You may see disassociation when they're in a school setting where they aren't able to focus. That could be for anything from physical abuse to domestic violence or sexual violence that's happening in the home. But you're going to see these changes in behaviors that are happening that way. For kids that are neglected, you may see that they don't have the proper clothing, they don't have the proper food to eat, things like this. You might see them losing a lot of weight, whatever that might be, and just in a state of neglect in that way. For others, you're seeing them as lost and not really doing so well because they aren't necessarily having those emotional connections where they need them. For any of us looking in, it's important to ask some questions about what's going on. Do you need anything? What might I be able to help with? Asking about how that what's going on. And certainly we see teachers are great for this in being able to recognize things. Schools are a big factor in a child's life, and they help to identify when these types of things are going on. Family members too sometimes get really concerned and will make those calls, those very difficult calls to make. But we know when you make that call, if we can get in, an assessment can be done, we can intervene early. And it doesn't mean that the family is going to be necessarily torn apart. It may mean that they're getting the resources they need to be able to work through some very difficult times, to learn some different behaviors. Some of us grew up in a time where spanking was, pretty much, that was the only parenting style. And although some of us, we may joke about it now, it's really not acceptable anymore to do that. There's other ways that we can parent and discipline our kids, and how we can put healthy boundaries in place to help people, progress. Beyond that is looking at who's having access to our kids and how do we identify when our child might be being groomed. How to identify when our family is being befriended because someone wants to have access to our children in that way. And so knowing some of those signs and what to look for is really important. And again, just knowing that, people are a call away and they really do want to help with that. And that both is through the Sexual Assault Center, the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, and a number of other resources that we have in the city of Lethbridge.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned a lot of things there. And of course, it can manifest itself in a number of different ways. Like you were mentioning neglect. I mean, it doesn't just come in the form of physical abuse. So what are some of the main types of child abuse?
Really, we see the predominant thing that we see is actually sexual abuse, um, which is, probably the scariest of them all. If you talk to people, this is what they shy away from talking the most about, is that this can happen to those that are under the age of 18, and it happens to people of all ages. And it's, people do prey on the vulnerable, and the more vulnerable we are, and children certainly meet that criteria of being vulnerable. There is there are predators that are looking for that. So for us to be able to break that cycle, I'm sorry, to answer your question. So sexual abuse is the main one we're seeing. We're also seeing physical abuse. We're seeing a lot of exposure to domestic violence in this area, emotional neglect and neglect. So those are the 5 primary areas that we're seeing. And again, we deal mostly with the sexual abuse, the severe physical abuse, and the neglect.
Yeah, you were mentioning before some stats there. I'm just curious, how prevalent is it in our society? Did you say 6,800 cases locally in the
Well,
region?
I said that's what the 34% would work out to when we look at the population of children in the city of Lethbridge. So it is a 34% prevalence rate for sexual abuse itself, let alone for other forms of abuse. But it is like, almost, 1 in 3 children that are experiencing some form of abuse in our society. So it is quite high when we're looking at this. And again, we see the same thing when we look at adults when it comes to sexual assault. It is quite high. And so there's lots of ways that we can intervene and that we need to intervene and really see this and have these fruitful conversations so that people can take the topic seriously and to make those reports, even when they're feeling, I don't want to get involved. We know we all don't want our neighbors to be mad at us or to have that, awful situation, but we always have to put those children first.
Yeah, we kind of have a role as individuals in society to help. Almost like it takes a village to raise a child. It's kind of true in that case, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. I mean, first, it is legislated that we are supposed to doing that. There is, fines that you can receive if you fail to, if you knowingly neglect reporting child abuse that's happening. They rarely take issue with that, but I think morally we have that obligation. And very much like you said, it is a village that raises a child, and we have to be looking out for each other in this society if we really want to make those changes.
Right. Christine, about a year ago or so, the Chinook Sexual Assault Center opened a new facility for the Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Center. So maybe tell us about some of the features of this new facility and why it's important.
Uh, Fantastic. Yes, so this is actually based on 40 years of evidence-based research. It actually originated out of Alabama and is widely used throughout the world, but predominantly in North America. So we're one of, I want to say, 8 child and youth advocacy centers in the province. What a child and youth advocacy center does is that it actually brings all those very messy pieces from police reporting or children's services, the medical exams, the need for psychologists, the school system, all together so that we can actually look at a case of child abuse. We call them triaging child abuse and seeing what those needs are. We can actually walk them through prepare them for a child forensic interview. So there's a process for that. And then actually work on those pathways to treatment and to healing for the child and the family. So the work isn't done independent of the family. It's done with the family, with the child for it to be most successful, and then to see them successfully through the court case. Where the child interview becomes really critical is that quite often children had to tell their story not one time, but several times. So they may be telling it to the doctor, they may be telling it to the police, they may be telling it to children's services. And every time that they're having to tell their story, they're being re-traumatized in that abuse that they've suffered. So having a really well-constructed child forensic interview is paramount to the success of the court case. And so at the end of the day, hopefully you have more people that are able to be convicted of these crimes, which again helps to mitigate those risks to other children. So part of that is we'll identify one interviewer for that child. And if, let's say, if it's police doing the interview, children's services would sit in a monitoring room and be able to get their notes at exactly the same time of what this is. When the tape is really well done, that tape then can be submitted to court as evidence. The child doesn't have to go into court to state what the abuse was. They still have to be cross-examined, but they don't have to state again what they went through. So again, you limit the number of times the child has to speak directly to the type of abuse that they endured.
Right. That's amazing. And that's the case with any victim that has to go through this again and again. Is there any thoughts on that happening for anybody that's been through a horrific situation?
Absolutely. Well, even, there's always a misnomer when people think that they have to come to a sexual assault center, they have to tell us all the details of the sexual assault, and you don't. We aren't secondary witnesses to the crime. We know it's horrible. We believe you, and we just want to know how you're doing and how you need to get to that next step of where you want to be. So that's what we're here for. And so I think there is, police are much more trauma informed than what they were before on this. And so this is why this model is widely adopted throughout North America. Is we want to do better by the kids, and we know if we can do better with the children, we're going to do better with the adults in time. That we're actually going to circumvent children growing up to being abused yet again and again, or the possibility that other harm is going to be done to other people. And so these are those ways to actually mitigate those types of risks in our society and to help people really thrive, because everyone needs that fair shot to make it through life and to be contributing citizens. So
Definitely.
yeah.
What about the work that you're doing to prevent abuse from happening? Are you working kind of with the parents that have sort of been doing this, or is it more of a let's get in front of the issue before it even gets there?
I guess there's two different ways that we work with things. When it comes to the Child and Youth Advocacy Center, the work is done with the non-offending parent and the family members that are connected with that child for that support. And again, how they're attaching with that child, how they're supporting that child, if there's other children who've been abused in the home as well, and how they're going to, reconstruct their lives after this, and how to move forward with that and what those child needs are. And so that's that therapy process. So both through some Connect parenting groups that are done, and some other groups that are done, as well as some therapy that is done by the folks that we have here. The other side is that there's an early intervention program that we have that's called Who Do You Tell, which we take out to schools. And it's a 1-hour program. We go in and we talk about, who do you tell if something is going on in your life that, is pretty scary. And so the difference between keep and speak a secret. So the keep secrets are, the fun surprise birthday party that's coming up. The speak secrets are the ones that are causing harm, that are making you feel awful inside. And sometimes telling their parents may not be the safest person in their life to tell, right?
Sad
And
but true. Yeah.
Sad but true. And we've seen this happen in, athletic programs with gymnastics and things like this. It might be a coach that's doing something or a player on a team that's doing something, whatever that is. Who can they go to if something is disrupting their life in this way? And so that's what the program's about. And we come back for a second time. And actually, we've had a number of disclosures that have come through this process. What that helps to do is it sets the stage that kids first know that it's good to talk about this, that it's okay to talk about this. So when someone's asked them to keep a secret that's this awful, that they don't have to keep it, that there's places they can go to. So that's more of an early intervention type program. The other thing we do is we go out and we do training, and we've done training with churches, we've done training with professionals, with other agencies, with community groups that just want to know more about child abuse, want to know more about how to receive disclosures, and we do that type of training as well. So again, let's not be scared of the language, and let's talk openly about child abuse. Let's talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault, because these are the realities that are happening in our world, and we do need to address them. And so how do we get people comfortable with that language so that we can actually move forward and address these issues and be healthier? And most of us, we all want our kids to grow up to pay their own bills, but to be healthy and to be happy. And so these are ways that we can do that. And so let's move that forward.
Wow, such important work that you all do down there at the Chinook Sexual Assault Center, and such a heavy topic. But thanks so much for being with us today, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Yes, appreciate having you on. Christine Cassie is the CEO of the Chinook Sexual Assault Center in Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.